Welcome back to the Winner's Circle. I am here with Terrence McCrossan. He is the CEO of Oversight. And if you don't know about Oversight, you will soon. But these are the guys that are working behind the scenes to make sure everything's going right in your financial systems. And we're going to talk to Terrence about that. He is a new 2026 Big Innovation Award winner. And so there's something to listen about here. And so let's learn and welcome Terrence. And thanks for joining the Winner's Circle.
I appreciate it, Russ. Yeah, we're thrilled with the recognition.
Yeah. So for those of us who don't know a lot about Oversight, I read your nomination. I looked at your website and stuff, but give us just kind of the elevator pitch of Oversight and what you guys do.
Yeah, I'd love to. I appreciate the opportunity. So, Oversight is an AI-powered software platform that large organizations use to monitor and analyze their transactional spend. So, we essentially look at high-risk spend processes for most organizations. It's the things their employees buy. So, think about card-based transactions, travel and expense programs, or it's related to the vendors that they pay. So, think about accounts payable programs, P2P programs. So we're the technology platform they rely on to ensure that where dollars flow are going toward good causes for the business, that they're in compliance with not only internal policy but external regulatory requirements, and that ultimately represents good spend for the business and keeps them out of a conversation around fraud, waste, and abuse that is very popular in the dialogue today, and a big focus for CFOs to manage spend.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody's trying to, find every last dime in their business that they can, with the weird economy and everything else that's going on. You guys are really doing something interesting. I think you're looking at it at a different perspective, away from kind of auditing the books and looking at more of a proactive lens on how to kind of avoid some of this stuff. Tell us how you're doing that.
Yeah, so certainly audits are good, but the challenge with audits, especially when it comes down to transactional spend, they're typically manual, they're typically infrequent, and they're usually very superficial. So what we attempt to do with our AI platform is to ensure that the audit of spend is both very timely, so we do it in near real time as transactions are occurring or as expense reports or invoices are flowing through the system. And we do it at multiple points in the process. So it's not a one view, it's at multiple points so we can detect risk in a variety of different ways. And we're analyzing it down to the detail level of the transaction. So we're using AI technology, large language models to really contextualize things that are getting purchased or expensed through the business, in providing a level of analysis and evaluation that gets well beyond what the typical human eye could recognize. So we're helping organizations really understand what they're buying and why, and who's behind it, and making sure that it's like I said, all good for the business.
I can't imagine having to do this in any sort of manual way these days. I mean, we've got all these systems. We've got ERP and, T&E systems and procurement tools, and all of them seem to have, some sort of this maybe baked in a little bit, but they all seem to have blind spots. Why are there so many blind spots in this? Why are we still talking about this?
You are exactly right. So it is a remarkable situation, even in the most sophisticated companies in the world, that they still attempt to do this manually. And the way that they do it is usually with large bodies of employees, doing manual sample audits, hoping to find something worth looking at. It's a remarkably ineffective, inefficient use of internal use resources, internal labor. And really, the outcomes they get out of it are really difficult to measure. So what we're looking to do with organizations is to automate that process, make it significantly more efficient, significantly more effective. But it is, for many folks, it's a first-time automation effort in this piece of the business. So it's a transformational opportunity that we see more and more CFOs taking advantage of, and the returns are pretty significant for them.
I was in telecom for decades, and this was a huge piece of a lot of companies' business was looking at telecom fraud and telecom abuse. And I think we've had on some winners who are looking at specifically just that category, and they've run businesses forever. And it was so evident. You just see the patterns, and I imagine it's similar within the finance system. Of you start seeing patterns, and especially with dumb things like receipt fraud. I mean, I remember back in the day, that's what I used to hear about, was somebody submitting receipts. The one I remember specifically was a salesperson that submitted a receipt for a lunch where she had taken the day off because she was sick, and she got fired. So, it was so hard to track that stuff then. What makes it so easy now?
Yeah, your first comment there around identification of patterns is really critical, and it's one of the biggest shortcomings with how organizations attempt to do this sort of evaluation today. Because there's a dynamic that the more people you throw at trying to audit this type of transactional detail, actually, the less effective the audit gets, because the more people involved in the mix, the less likely they are to correlate factors across each of their particular findings. So, what machines are extraordinarily good at is that correlation factor. Um, where they're analyzing 100% of all the transactions flowing through and drawing correlating conclusions based on the large volumes of data. So that continuous monitoring, continuous analysis, and large scale evaluation is part of the effectiveness of the system. And certainly to the second part of your comment there, it's remarkable what gets uncovered, not only in the employee spend, but actually in the vendor activity as well. So
I
certainly,
bet.
as you can imagine, our storyboard with regard to things employees do is quite long. Everything from paying for destination weddings to buying rather remarkable Christmas gifts for themselves and their employees to a whole variety of things that end up getting expensed through corporate programs that somehow flow through without being recognized for a lot of organizations.
Well, that was the other one I remember hearing about. Was it was the story that was floating around, I think the tech companies for a while were red boots, the red boots story, which was, the boss walking around, some event, some foreign city with, colleagues or, an underling, and her saying, "Why don't you buy those boots for me and expense them?" And they were red boots. And
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, that stuff, it's all over. I've seen it throughout my career especially just the abuse stuff. How do you start to bucketize those, and which buckets are kind of the biggest buckets?
Yeah, there's a few, and I'd say, while those sorts of kind of egregious headline grabbing things are still quite predominant in spend patterns, the thing that we see a lot of emergence around that we're focused on very much is the much more sophisticated attempt at either fraud or embezzlement. Quite honestly, so you mentioned fake receipts. The ability today for LLMs to generate a fake receipt for just about any expense in the world is quite eye popping.
Yeah.
Organizations today don't have a way of managing that. So a technology like Oversight helps to bring that sort of metadata type analysis where you can identify true receipts from fake ones. And similar on the vendor front. So things like business email compromise or fake invoices actually being submitted through an accounts payable process are extraordinarily difficult to identify by the human eye or with normal control processes. So that layer of sophistication that we're bringing to that element of analysis is also really significant. So when you think about buckets, um, there's the egregious, I suppose, right? The things that are outside the box. There are errors, so fraud tends to get a lot of the conversation in the headlines, but one
Right.
of the most important things that we do is provide a stopgap against just honest errors in a process. We see this all the time in accounts payables programs where a $50,000 invoice gets fat fingered, and all of a sudden it's a $500,000 payment flowing out the door with no one noticing. Right, then it becomes a recovery effort that organizations have to chase. So there's fraud, there's errors, and then there's, as we mentioned before, just wasteful spend, right? Things that
Yeah.
employees are doing that maybe it's with honest intent, but wildly out of policy. That if you can get your arms around, you have an opportunity to really help manage cash leakage for a business.
Yeah, and I imagine your customers, you had mentioned most of them are kind of new to this and new to the, the actual, looking at the books in this way.
Yeah.
And I imagine they're your sales model, your pitch to them, your marketing guy is, we're going to save you money. Um, we're going to, reduce your labor costs because you're not doing all this stuff manually, and your people are going to be more productive. What do you think surprises your customers the most in the first 90 days in those buckets? Are they amazed by the spend, or are they amazed by, just the view? What's going on after that kind of 90-day
Yeah, the
window?
first 90 days is quite interesting. And to back up, most organizations come to the realization of a need through one of several ways. Um, ideally, you want to come to the recognition of a need for a platform like Oversight because you're trying to modernize your financial approach. You're trying to be, much more receptive to available technology, much more efficient with your labor, and you do it as part of an effort to drive that sort of a business outcome. Others come to the recognition, I'd say, through unfortunate events, whether it's regulatory fines, SEC exposure, some sort of egregious headline grabbing event that, especially for public companies, puts them in a limelight that requires them to be reactive to trying to manage this for the business. So, ideally, we want to be working with organizations that have a much more proactive approach that are trying to get ahead of this. So, in those instances, the first 90 days, for them tends to be quite eye opening, right? So for many of them, it's the first look at broad swaths of their transactional detail. And the first look at what's really going on beneath the covers. And it's everything, as I mentioned, from just employees innocently doing bad things that runs afoul of policy that goes unnoticed, all the way to the most egregious cases. That tends to be, kind of the thing that seals the deal in a sales process, right? So, when you can show in a boardroom, not only transaction level bad events happening, but to assign a dollar value to it that for most of these organizations is in the high seven figures, especially when you're
Yeah.
talking about accounts payables programs. It's a very significant CFO attention getter.
Yeah, I imagine it is a product that kind of sells itself, especially on that first sale. It's like if you're not doing this, it's like, where have you been?
Yeah, sometimes you have to lead the horse to water, Rouse.
Yeah,
I wish everyone had the same eyes wide open approach. It's very interesting conversation with CFOs, right? So even the ones that have a recognition of a need, there's almost a part of the culture that that wasteful spend is a cost of doing business. But
mm.
it doesn't need to be that way with modern technology. You can actually pinpoint it. You can focus auditors on controlling it, and you can really measure the outcomes to see that it's beneficial for your business.
Yeah, and that's the real trick, right? Is maybe that's not wasteful. Maybe it's beneficial spend. It's just weird.
Yes.
Maybe it's outside of the ordinary.
Yeah,
So
or
I
maybe it's an opportunity to negotiate better rates with a vendor that you're doing high volumes of spend with, right? So
absolutely,
there's
yeah.
a process control that really comes into play here, where you can have much more focused conversations with your vendor community, with your supply chain, quite honestly, right? And make sure that dollars are being evaluated, spent effectively, but also maximized, right, in terms of discounts and other areas of opportunity.
Yeah, we saw the same thing with telecom expense management back in the day. It was, these CEOs had no idea that thousands, and I don't think it was to the millions of dollars. I'm sure it may have been back then. You're talking about the cost of phone calls back then. But, it was just, they had no idea it was going on in their business. And, a lot of them, and I see it happening today. A lot of them put in processes in place, but they also put in kind of stopgaps, kind of systematically to say, hey, cut this off if you see it happening. And I imagine with AI, we're starting to see that. I see companies struggle and tools struggle with where's that kind of trigger of auto resolving stuff or flagging it for a human to kind of get. Where are we with that and kind of these financial transactions of being able to flag that stuff, cut it off at the gap, or having more analysis needed?
Yeah, we're aggressively moving in that direction, and I'd say audit it's a unique process. The way I would think about it is, it's fraught with areas of gray, right? So there is a need for some human discernment around a lot of purchase behavior to decide whether it was good and intentful or not. But what we're trying to do with oversight is provide as much auto resolution capability as is possible to drive process efficiency, but leave enough room for the human in the loop to provide discernment in those areas of gray, so that decisions are being made, not purely by the technology, but in a way that's easily auditable, if you will, more transparent, and with better reasoning than perhaps the machine is prepared to do at the moment. So we're trying to find the right balance. There's a lot of employee friction issues with some of these
Mm.
decisioning, so you don't want the machine to purely be the decider, if you will. Some of it needs to be escalated to an auditor who puts a layer of eye and thoughtfulness into it before there's an action taken. But certainly our approach, not only with the capabilities we currently deliver, but with our agentic strategy going forward, which is a big part of that auto resolution opportunity, is provide as much efficiency as we can with as much opportunity for the human to intervene when it's necessary.
Well, and I imagine, as we go through this, we're going to lose the tasks that we've been doing, and our jobs are going to be automated and stuff. And so we're going to play a more strategic role. And I think it's interesting in the finance realm, at least in my experience. And it's true with everybody, but lawyers, some are good, some are bad, some are strategic, some aren't. And finance leaders tend to be that way too. A lot of times you got kind of accountant type guys that are that are kind of by the books, process oriented. I need the numbers, no in and out, no gray. And then you see a tool like yours can really help somebody kind of step out of that role and really become more strategic to the business to say, hey, look, this is going a little crazy. This is going a little weird. Adjust this, spend more here. I would think your tool really gets into the weeds, and with AI, it really starts to let them, see, have a little bit more vision for the finances than just kind of being the cop.
That's a great way to characterize it. So much of the effort in finance in general, not only in audit, but across the financial business, it's a very clerical role, mostly focused on information gathering, right? So if you look at most statistics around how finance organizations apply labor, 80% of it's information gathering, 20% of it is decisioning and actioning. So what we're trying to do is change that paradigm and actually flip it on its ear, where there's a minimal amount of time that auditors or financial teams have to spend gathering information about their spend, and they can spend the majority of their time actually focused on how to make it more optimal. And some of that is process outcomes, some of that is working with vendors, as I mentioned. Some of it is working with employees. Some of it is updating policy, but making sure that the time that they're spending is strategic in nature and not clerical and administrative. And that's the big pivot we try to drive with the organizations we work with.
Yeah, and it's got to be a very interesting time. It's an interesting time for all of us with AI, but for finance, you're really getting out of the number collecting and the number crunching, and it's really getting into it's really where you find the really financially well run companies is the guys that are the people that are really making the strategic moves and looking long term, not at how am I going to fund the business tomorrow, but how am I going to fund it, 3 years from now. Um, and so AI is just getting deeper and deeper into all the financial operations that we have. Where do you see the next level kind of emerging in AI and kind of that financial space?
Yeah, it is on the operational side. I think we are, quite mature, at least at Oversight, in our ability to analyze data, to consume a lot of different data elements, whether it's out of ERP systems, whether it's out of bank feed files, whether it's a number of other inputs, regulatory detail out of the marketplace. Our ability to provide really sophisticated analysis is quite far along the path right now. The next opportunity, as you alluded to, is how do you take that and actually start automating processes so that the actual efficiency across the finance team actually comes to life. And I think that is, much of the promise around the agentic AI. Kind of next wave, if you will. That it's come along pretty quickly. I know organizations are still working through kind of the internal thought process of how much do you want agents to be doing, aspects of work, and to the extent that you do, can it be transparent and explainable? But I certainly do think that that element of driving efficiency across the workplace is going to be the next element of where AI really contributes.
Yeah, it is going to be a wild ride.
It is, for
It is
sure.
going to be so interesting to see this play out in the next, 10 years. We've already seen it, just start nipping at the heels of some of these tasks that have been either, annoying or cumbersome or whatever. I mean, I see it in my own business. I see it in my own workflows, personally, professionally. It is purely transformational, and the speed of which we've come in the last year and a half just at this is, imagine a year and a half from now. So I want to take a step back, kind of get at this one other way. When you talk to those customers and you see this life cycle of them going from kind of good to bad to good. If you could look back and you've got a startup out there or a new CEO, if they could fix one thing about how they're managing that risk spend today, what do you recommend they do?
From a customer standpoint, Russ, in terms of
Yeah.
how they should look at this, yeah, the opportunity today to get ahead of the curve is so significantly beyond where it was 3 years ago, 5 years ago, right? So if I think about our sales processes, we talked a bit about that. When I joined Oversight a little over 7 years ago, while we were already an AI foundation. Much of the conversation we had with clients was actually staying away from the AI language and lingo. It quite honestly scared buyers, 7 years ago. They didn't understand it. There was a concept of a black box application that they couldn't necessarily get under the covers of. So while they wanted our capability and our outcomes, they didn't want to know too much about the technology and how it worked. We're in a much different place currently, and as you mentioned, the last 18 months in particular has been transformational. That not only do CFOs carry a mandate to transform and to adapt AI, they have an increasing sophistication of understanding how it works, and want to know more. So, when I think of the buyer landscape today, having that curiosity, and that drive to execute the transformation, but understanding what the technology is doing so that you can best marry your people processes and your internal operations to the capabilities of the technology is a really significant recipe for success. We see buyers getting much better at that, and I think uh, it's a much more helpful dynamic in terms of how we work, as a software partner, as a vendor, as an audit partner with these organizations, today than it was, 3 to 5 years ago. We're not having to really teach what the outcomes are supposed to be doing. We can really be focused on the application of our software and our technology to specific business processes and outcomes, or desires to help achieve a much more definitive result. And I think that's a big transformation for a lot of the buyer community.
Yeah, and I think CEOs get it. I don't think they realize how important um, having a really great financial team is. I know they do, but I've been in organizations where that switch has been made. A personnel shift and a team shift has been made, and the impact to the overall organization is so huge. You think it's just a financial impact, but it's not. All those processes, all that stuff really drives culture. And it is such a cultural shift when you have a really well-run, financially well-run company.
Agreed, and it's a piece of the business that always hasn't been early adopters of evolving technology or emerging technology, and for good reason. So, a lot of the finance domain is very process driven. When you think about the need for stable processes, stable applications, keeping ambiguity out of the financial records, their ability to roll up detail in a an auditable, credible way on a quarterly basis or an annual close basis. So for all those reasons, CFOs haven't always been the early adopters or aggressive innovators in organizations, and the clients of ours that we see being really good at what they're trying to do from a financial standpoint are typically led by CFOs with a different paradigm or mindset, right? They're looking to be on the front end of the technology curve, certainly looking to integrate it with stable processes and things that they have in place. They don't want disruption in core capability, but they want to be on the leading edge of how organizations are taking advantage of some of these newer capabilities, because it does drive a different dynamic, a different outcome for their businesses that is not only financially beneficial, but culturally beneficial and has a lot of other effects as well. So,
Yeah, because it gets it, and I know you preach this. It's not the alerts. Nobody wants alerts. It's outcomes, and you've been preaching that the whole time. So, I think that message is true at every level. We don't want alerts. We want outcomes, and we've been forced with alerts. Whether it be in network operations center or finance teams or anything. It's the little bell doesn't tell us much. We need to know what's going on. Well,
exactly right. Yeah,
yeah,
in our business, we call those exceptions, right? So the exceptional activities that take place, as part of a spend pattern. But what organizations want is an action plan, a measurement viewpoint, and the ability to essentially tie those outcomes to some sort of a financial benefit, policy benefit, or something else that's beneficial for the business, right? As a
yeah.
measurement.
Well, Terrence, this has been fascinating. Finance isn't the sexiest, topic in the world, but it's definitely, there's a lot of work going on there and a lot of interest and it's obviously it's probably the most important department in the company, right? I mean, it's where the money goes.
Indeed, yeah. So we're bringing sexy back, Ross. Ross. So this is the new area that CFOs have an opportunity to be on the leading edge, as
Well,
I
I
mentioned.
can't wait. Yeah, I'm going to buy stock in Gucci and Fendi because those guys are going to go out and get some new tracksuits, and we'll see them in the aisles of CES next year.
Very good.
Terrence,
Yes,
thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. This has been super interesting, and congratulations on the win.
we appreciate it, Ross. So thanks so much for involving us.